Garbage man saved an old man from the cold. The next day, a luxury car pulled into his driveway. It was still dark when Daniel Harper stepped out into the bitter cold. The streets of Milwaukee were silent, blanketed in fresh snow that hadn't yet been disturbed. His truck rumbled down the narrow road, headlights slicing through the fog of his breath. Another day, another route, another morning pretending he wasn't tired of waking up alone. Daniel wasn't just a garbage collector. He was a widowed father, raising his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, in a small rented house on the south side. His hands were cracked from the cold, but he never complained. His work uniform was faded, his boots worn thin, but he smiled to every neighbor who waved, especially old Mrs. Grant, who always left him a coffee thermos at the corner of Lincoln Avenue. But that morning, something broke the routine. As the truck hissed to a stop in front of a run-down blue house on Peachwood Street, Daniel noticed a small detail most others would miss. The mailbox, stuffed with 3 days' worth of mail. The newspaper on the steps, frozen and untouched. The curtains inside, drawn tight, yet uneven, like someone had yanked them closed in a hurry. Daniel paused. His co-worker, Luis, honked from down the block. "Yo, Dan, you coming?" Daniel waved him off. "I'll catch up. Go ahead." Something didn't feel right. He stepped out of the truck and walked toward the porch. Each step creaked beneath the ice. He knocked once, then again. No answer. Through the frosted window pane, he peered in and froze. There, in the living room, sat an elderly man slumped in a chair, motionless. Daniel's breath caught. He banged on the door. Still nothing. Protocol screamed at him to walk away, but instinct didn't listen. He twisted the doorknob. It was unlocked. Inside, the air was colder than outside. The heater was dead, the silence eerie. Daniel rushed in, kneeling beside the old man, who was barely breathing, his lips blue, fingers stiff. Still alive, but fading fast. "Hey, sir? Can you hear me?" Nothing. Daniel yanked off his own coat, wrapping it tightly around the man's body. With numb fingers, he grabbed his phone and called for help. "Emergency services. What's your location?" "I found a man. He's unconscious. Hypothermia, I think. He's freezing. Please hurry." As he waited, he didn't move. He stayed there, one hand on the man's shoulder, whispering, "Hold on, all right? You're not alone now." By the time the ambulance arrived, Daniel's hands were shaking, but not from the cold. He didn't know the man's name, but something deep inside told him this moment would change everything. And it would. The waiting room at Milwaukee General Hospital smelled like overused hand sanitizer and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Daniel Harper sat hunched in a plastic chair, his knuckles raw from the cold. His coat, the one he had wrapped around the old man, was now sealed in a biohazard bag in the hallway, saturated from the freezing sweat of a life barely held together. His phone buzzed. A message from his daughter. "Daddy, when are you coming home? Are you okay?" Daniel typed back with frozen fingers. "Soon, sweetheart. Everything's fine. Just helping someone." He looked up when a nurse approached. She was young, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes and a clipboard pressed to her chest. "You're the man who found Mr. Grayson." Daniel stood. "Yeah. Is he okay?" She paused, just long enough to make his heart skip. "He's stable. Severe hypothermia. If you hadn't found him when you did, it would have been hours, maybe less." Daniel let out a slow breath, almost a whisper. "Thank God." The nurse tilted her head slightly. "You a relative?" "No, just a garbage man on his route." That made her smile. Then you're the right kind of stranger. Daniel followed her down a hallway lined with monitors and murmuring machines. Through a glass panel, he saw him, the old man, tubes in his nose, skin pale, but breathing steadily. There was a thin blanket over his frail body, a heater humming softly beside the bed. His name is Leonard Grayson, the nurse said. Lives alone. No records of family. Been admitted once before for dehydration 2 years ago. We tried contacting someone back then. No response. Daniel looked through the glass with heavy eyes. He didn't even lock his door. He probably didn't expect anyone to come in or out. A long silence filled the space between them. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. Can I sit with him for a bit? Of course. Inside the room, the beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound. Daniel pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down slowly. For a moment, he just stared. Not at the tubes or the machines, but at the man himself. The lines on Leonard's face weren't just from age. They were from time. Time spent waiting. Time spent alone. I don't know you, Mr. Grayson, Daniel said quietly. But something tells me I might have ended up like you one day. His voice wavered. He looked at Leonard as if searching for a reflection. My wife passed 3 years ago. Car crash. Left me and my little girl behind. I get up every day at 4 in the morning. Haul trash for a city that barely sees me. And most days, I'm invisible. But not today. Leonard's hand twitched slightly under the blanket. Daniel leaned forward, speaking softer now. You've been alone for a long time, haven't you? People walked by, never knocked. I almost didn't knock either. There was no answer, but Daniel stayed. For 20, maybe 30 minutes. Just sitting. Just breathing beside him. In silence, but not in absence. That evening, he came back. With Emily. She held a paper bag filled with cookies and a crayon drawing of a man in a chair, and a big red heart above his head. This is for the man Daddy saved, she said, eyes wide with curiosity as they entered the hospital room again. Leonard remained unconscious, but the machines beeped a little steadier. Daniel helped her place the drawing on the side table. I think he'll like it, she whispered. Daniel smiled. I think so too. They sat together, father and daughter, a widowed man and a little girl in a cold hospital room, warming it with something no heater could provide. Hope. And though no one said it aloud, something had shifted, not just in that room, but in everything that would follow. The next morning came heavy with gray skies and wind that cut straight through winter jackets. But Daniel didn't care. He skipped breakfast, dropped Emily at school with a kiss to the forehead, and drove back to the hospital without telling a soul. Something about Leonard Grayson had stayed with him. Not just the image of the man slumped in the chair, almost frozen to death, but the silence that surrounded it all. The kind of silence you don't hear, but feel. A silence Daniel recognized. He had lived it too. When he walked into the room, a surprise awaited. Leonard was awake. Barely, but awake. Eyes half open, skin still pale, but no longer ghost-like. A nurse was adjusting his IV line and smiled when she saw Daniel. You've got good timing, she said, stepping aside. Leonard's eyes moved slowly toward him, unfocused, but aware. Daniel stepped closer, pulling a chair up to the side of the bed again. Good morning, Mr. Grayson, he said gently. You gave us all a scare. Leonard blinked slowly. His voice came out like dry leaves scraping against pavement, barely audible. Who are you? I'm Daniel Harper. I was the one who found you. You were passed out in your chair. I couldn't just walk away." Leonard's lips trembled slightly, as if unsure how to form the next words. His throat worked to swallow, painful and dry. "I remember the cold," he whispered. "Then, nothing." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, you were close, real close, but you're not gone, not yet." Leonard's gaze softened. "No one comes around, not in years." Daniel sat forward, resting his arms on his knees. "I figured. Your mail was stacked up. And that paper on your step? It had frost on it. Look, I know I crossed a line breaking into your house, but I'd do it again, without question." Leonard closed his eyes briefly. "I used to wait for someone to knock." The way he said it, flat, not bitter, just true. The quiet truth of someone who had waited long enough to stop hoping. Daniel let that settle for a second before replying. "Well, someone knocked. Finally." Leonard opened his eyes again, studying Daniel more carefully now. "Why'd you do it? Most people, they'd keep walking." Daniel hesitated. "I guess I just saw myself. Down the line. An old man in a chair, forgotten by everyone, except I had the chance to do something about it." A beat. Then Leonard whispered, "You got a family?" "Just me and my daughter, Emily. She's 8, loves cookies, hates math, and thinks every dog is her best friend." Leonard chuckled, just once, short and dry, like dust being stirred after years of stillness. "I had a daughter too," he said, "but she left, long time ago." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "You don't talk?" Leonard shook his head slightly. "We haven't spoken in over 10 years. 10 years, Leonard's voice thinned. "One fight, just one. That's all it took." Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling for a moment. "You want to talk about it?" Leonard gave a half-smile, worn and bitter. "No one ever asked that before." "Well," Daniel shrugged, "I'm not most people." For a long minute, neither spoke. Just the soft beeping of the machines, and the wind rattling faintly against the hospital window. Then Leonard began to speak. "She was 24, just graduated, got into some trouble I didn't approve of. The kind of trouble parents blow out of proportion. I yelled. She yelled louder. Next day, she packed her car and left. I never got a call, not even a letter." He paused. "I used to sit by the window every Sunday, just in case." Daniel swallowed hard. "And now?" "Now, I just keep the curtains closed." That hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. He didn't have to imagine it. He could feel it. The emptiness of a room meant for two. The ghost of a voice that used to fill a hallway. "Can I bring Emily by again?" Daniel asked. "She's been asking about you." Leonard blinked, surprised. "She doesn't even know me." "She knows you're someone worth drawing a picture for. That's enough." Leonard didn't answer right away. His voice was fragile, but steadier. "Okay, I'd like that." Daniel stood, slipping on his coat again. "We'll come tomorrow." As he opened the door, Leonard spoke once more, softly, almost to himself. "You really showed up, didn't you?" Daniel turned back, just for a moment. "Yeah, and I'm not done yet." But outside the hospital, something else was unfolding. As Daniel climbed into his truck and checked his phone, a voicemail was waiting. Unknown number. He pressed play. "Mr. Harper, my name is Victoria Bennett. I believe you helped my father." She paused. "His name is Leonard Grayson. I'm sorry it took me this long to find out." The voice cracked, a mixture of guilt and something else harder to name. "I'm coming to see you. Tomorrow morning." Click. Daniel sat there for a full minute, unmoving. For 10 years, the door had stayed closed. Now, someone was finally coming back. And they weren't just bringing memories. They were bringing everything that had been left unsaid. The next morning, the sun struggled to break through a thick curtain of clouds. Milwaukee's streets shimmered with a thin sheet of frost, the kind that made every step uncertain. But Daniel's mind wasn't on the road. Not today. He kept glancing at the clock on the dashboard. 8:42 a.m. The voicemail echoed in his head. "I'm coming to see you. Tomorrow morning." He didn't know what to expect. He had saved a man's life, but what was walking into his driveway now wasn't gratitude. It was the past, complicated, messy, raw. He was bent over tying Emily's shoes when he heard the hum of an engine approaching. A black car turned slowly onto his narrow street. Sleek, elegant, completely out of place in his modest neighborhood. The engine purred before coming to a halt in front of his home. Emily looked up. "Daddy, who's that?" Daniel stood slowly. "I think that's someone who hasn't been here in a long time." The car door opened. Out stepped a woman in her early 40s. Tall, poised, wrapped in a long gray wool coat. Her eyes scanned the street like someone waking from a 10-year sleep. Her hair was swept back in a loose bun, her heels too fancy for the cracked sidewalk beneath them. She hesitated before taking a step forward. "Mr. Harper?" Her voice trembled. Daniel nodded slowly. "That's me." She closed the distance, her breath catching in the cold. "I'm Victoria. Victoria Bennett. I'm Leonard's daughter." He studied her face. Her features echoed Leonard's, especially in the eyes, but where his were tired and distant, hers were sharp, on guard. "You got my voicemail?" she asked. "I did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I know how this must look," she said, gesturing around awkwardly. "Showing up like this after all these years? I didn't even know he was alive until last night." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "How did you find out?" She exhaled, rubbing her gloved hands together. "I still get automated hospital alerts tied to his old insurance account. They've been going to spam for years, but one came through. I opened it by accident. Saw the name. I thought, there's no way. And you decided to come." Victoria's face hardened, defensive. "I didn't come for closure, Mr. Harper. I came because I needed to see what kind of man you are." Daniel looked taken aback. "Excuse me?" she continued, voice firm. "You saved his life. You're a stranger. You could have just walked past. I've spent 10 years convincing myself he didn't want me around, that he didn't care. And yet, here you are." Daniel crossed his arms. "I didn't do it for applause or judgment. I saw a man dying in a chair. I didn't think, I just acted." Victoria's voice broke slightly. "I haven't spoken to him since the week of my wedding. He hated who I married, said I was throwing my life away. I yelled back. I wanted him to say, 'I'm proud of you anyway.' But he didn't, so I left." Daniel looked down at the icy pavement. "Sounds familiar." Victoria's head tilted. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I get it. I had fights with my father too. But I also buried him before we could make peace. You didn't." She swallowed hard. "I don't even know what I'd say if I saw him. What if he doesn't want me there?" Daniel's voice softened. "Then it's his turn to say something. You've already come further than most would." Victoria blinked back something close to tears, then noticed Emily, who had stayed by the porch, watching curiously. Daniel turned. "Emily, come say hi." The girl bounded down the steps. "This is my daughter. She's been keeping Mr. Grayson company with drawings and cookies." Victoria knelt, smiling faintly. "I'm sure he loves that." Emily nodded. He smiled once, but not a lot. He looks lonely. Victoria's expression faltered. Yeah, he was. Emily tilted her head. Are you going to visit him? Victoria straightened slowly. I think I need to. Hours later, the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor of Milwaukee General. Daniel walked beside Victoria as they approached room 408. He said nothing. She was already shaking slightly, her fingers gripping her purse like a lifeline. Inside the room, Leonard was awake, propped up slightly. His face turned to the window, watching snow flurries gather against the pane. Victoria stepped in first. He didn't turn around. Dad, she said. His head moved slowly, just slightly, but his eyes didn't meet hers. Victoria's voice trembled. It's me. Finally, Leonard looked. His mouth parted, as if he was unsure whether to breathe or speak. Victoria? She nodded, barely holding herself together. Yeah, it's me. Silence filled the room like water rising in a sealed chamber. I wasn't sure you were still. She stopped, unable to say the word. Leonard's voice was weak, but firm. I was, but I stopped hoping. Her face collapsed. Don't say that. You didn't call, he said, staring into her. Not once. I was angry, she shot back, and hurt, and scared that if I did call, you wouldn't pick up. I would've, he whispered, every time. I wanted to. She walked to the bed, sat beside him. Her gloved hand hovered in the air before gently settling over his. You should have called too, she said softly. They stayed like that for a moment, breathing, holding a silence that didn't feel empty this time. I'm here now, she added. Leonard's fingers twitched beneath hers. That's all that matters. Outside the hospital room, Daniel stood with Emily in the hallway. She looked up at him. Is that his daughter? Daniel nodded. Is she staying? He smiled softly. I think she's just getting started. But what none of them knew, what no one could have imagined, was that Leonard Grayson had one more surprise. One final, quiet gesture he had kept hidden for years. A decision made long before his daughter returned, and it was about to change Daniel's life forever. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty when Daniel returned, hours after Victoria's reunion with her father. The hum of a vending machine buzzed in the background, and fluorescent lights flickered above chipped linoleum floors. Daniel sat at a corner table with a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hands, now cold. He hadn't touched it. His eyes were distant, locked on something far away in his thoughts. His late wife, perhaps. Or maybe the quiet pain he recognized in both Leonard and Victoria. Pain he carried too. He didn't notice Victoria until she sat across from him, silent. Her coat draped over her shoulders, eyes red but resolute. Daniel looked up. How did it go? She let out a breath that sounded like a decade of tension being released. It was hard, but it was real. He remembered everything. My birthday, my major, even the name of my dog. She paused. He never stopped loving me. He just didn't know how to show it. Daniel nodded slowly. Some people never do. Victoria looked at him, really looked. Thank you, Daniel, for everything. You didn't just save his life. You gave him the chance to feel something again. And you gave me a chance I didn't think I'd ever get. He gave a quiet smile. You don't owe me anything. But Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. I think I do. She slid it across the table. Daniel blinked. What is it? She hesitated. Before I came here, I stopped by my father's house. I hadn't been there in years, but I found something. In his study. Locked in a drawer. Daniel picked up the envelope carefully and opened it. Inside, folded paper, yellowed with time. Legal paperwork. A property deed. He stared at the name printed in elegant black ink. Harper. Daniel. Beneficiary. His mouth went dry. What is this? Victoria's eyes shimmered, but her voice was steady. My father bought a second house 20 years ago. He never moved into it. Said it didn't feel right without someone to share it with. After my mother died, it just sat there, empty. Daniel looked up, his voice low. Why my name? I've only known him a few days. Because you were the first person in years who didn't need a reason to care. Daniel shook his head, stunned. This can't be real. Victoria smiled softly. He called you an angel, you know. Not to your face, of course, but to the nurse. He said, an angel in work boots. Daniel swallowed hard, looking back down at the paper like it might vanish if he blinked. It's just a house, he said. No, Victoria corrected gently. It's a beginning. That evening, as snow dusted the windshield of his old pickup truck, Daniel drove across the city with Emily in the back seat, still in her school uniform, humming a tune out of key. She had no idea what was about to happen. Where are we going, Daddy? She asked, her head resting on the window. He glanced at her through the rearview mirror. I want to show you something. The neighborhood they entered was quiet, tucked behind rows of tall trees and brick fences. The houses were larger, older, each one with character. Not wealthy, but warm, lived in. Daniel pulled up to a modest two-story home with faded shutters and a wraparound porch. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the snow. He put the truck in park and turned to her. Come on. Emily stepped out, her boots crunching on the icy path. Whose house is this? Daniel walked to the front steps, pulled the key from his pocket, and opened the door. It creaked softly as it swung open. The air inside smelled like dust and old wood. Furniture still lined the living room, a couch covered in a plastic sheet, a bookshelf half filled with outdated encyclopedias, a faded rug rolled into the corner. Daniel stood in the doorway, holding his breath. Emily wandered in behind him. It's quiet, she whispered. He nodded. Yeah, but not for long. Can we live here? He looked down at her, eyes soft. That's the plan. Emily spun in a slow circle in the middle of the empty living room. Can my room have the window facing the backyard? Daniel chuckled. You can have any room you want. They explored together, Daniel opening closets, Emily jumping on creaky floorboards like she was testing the soul of the house. The kitchen had an old stove with yellowed knobs. The upstairs bedroom had floral wallpaper peeling at the corners. But to Daniel, it was perfect. More than perfect. Because it wasn't just shelter. It was proof that the world still had corners of kindness in it. That a man who once had nothing could now offer his daughter a home. Back at the hospital, Leonard sat propped up in his bed, Victoria reading to him from an old book she'd found in his belongings. He stopped her mid-sentence. Did you give it to him? He asked, voice raspier now. She nodded. Yes. He didn't want to take it. Leonard smiled faintly. Then he's the right man. Victoria closed the book gently. You never told me about that house. He looked out the window. I was waiting for someone to deserve it. And outside, snow continued to fall. Not harshly. Gently now, covering the city not like a blanket of cold, but a quiet reminder. Some winters are meant to be survived. Others are meant to be shared. 3 days passed. The snow didn't stop, but life in Milwaukee pressed forward, slow and quiet under the white. Daniel and Emily had started moving small boxes into their new home, carrying memories inside cardboard labeled in Sharpie. Their old rented house still stood, but it no longer felt like home. This one, Leonard's house, already held something warmer, something sacred. Each evening, after dinner and homework, Daniel would drive to the hospital. Not out of obligation, out of something else. Connection. On the fourth night, the hospital room was dim, lit only by the soft orange glow of a bedside lamp. Leonard sat up, more alert now, a blanket pulled over his lap. His skin looked better. His cheeks had some color again. Daniel walked in carrying a paper bag from the local diner. "Brought you something." Leonard looked up. "If it's soup again, I might fake a coma." Daniel smirked, pulling out a grilled cheese and fries. "Upgraded." Leonard chuckled. "You spoil me." Daniel sat down, placing the food on the small rolling table. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was familiar. The kind between men who didn't need to fill the air to prove their presence mattered. After a while, Leonard spoke. "Victoria's been coming every day." Daniel nodded. "I know. I've seen her in the hall." "She read to me yesterday," Leonard said quietly. "It used to be her mother's favorite book. The Secret Garden. Never thought I'd hear those words again in this lifetime." Daniel leaned back in the chair. "Do you regret it? All that time?" Leonard stared at the window. The snow outside made the world look softer than it really was. "Every day," he said. "But regret doesn't build bridges. Showing up does." He paused, his voice growing quieter. "That's what you taught me." Daniel swallowed. "I didn't do anything special." Leonard looked him dead in the eye. "That's what makes it special." There was a long silence. Then Leonard reached slowly into a drawer beside the bed and pulled out a small wooden box. It looked handmade, carved with initials that had faded over time, L+M. He placed it on the table between them. "What's that?" Daniel asked. Leonard's fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside, a stack of old photographs, some in color, some black and white. Daniel watched as Leonard took one from the top, a faded photo of a woman in a floral dress, painting at an easel in a sunlit room. "That's Margaret," Leonard said. "My wife, Victoria's mother." Daniel leaned in, studying the woman's serene face. "She looks peaceful." "She was," Leonard said, smiling. "And stubborn." God, she was stubborn. She believed people could change, even when they didn't want to. He took out another photo, this time of a little girl on a swing set, mid-laugh. "Victoria, 8 years old. She used to make me push her so high I thought she'd take off." Daniel smiled. "You miss those days." "I ache for them," Leonard admitted. "But I also know, if I died last week, none of this would have happened. You showing up, Victoria returning, that house, finally, lived in." He closed the box slowly. "You know what's funny? When Margaret passed, I shut everyone out. I thought grief was something you handled alone. That's how a man was supposed to be. Strong, silent. But silence can kill you too." Daniel nodded slowly, feeling each word as if they were meant for him. "I've been there." Leonard studied him. "You still wear your wedding ring." Daniel looked down at his hand. The ring had dulled over time, the gold scratched, but not broken. "I promised her I'd always wear it," he said, "for Emily's sake, so she'd know what real love looks like, even after it's gone." Leonard's eyes softened. "Then you're twice the man I was." The next day, Victoria sat with Emily on the porch of the new house. Emily was drawing on the steps with colored chalk, her cheeks pink from the cold. Victoria had brought hot cocoa and a new scarf for her. "You know," Victoria said, "when I was your age, I used to build snow castles in my front yard. My dad helped me make one so big, we couldn't see the street." Emily grinned. "Did he use a shovel?" "Nope," Victoria said. "He used his hands, said castles were built by heart, not by tools." Emily kept drawing. "My daddy built this whole house," she said proudly. Victoria blinked. "He told you that?" "Well, he didn't say it like that, but he made it feel like home. So I think that counts." Victoria stared at the child, speechless for a moment. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think it does." That evening, Daniel found something unexpected in the living room of the house. He was unpacking a box marked Paintings when he unwrapped a canvas with a signature in the bottom corner. Emsa Grayson, 1979. The image was of a lakeside. Trees, golden sun, a little girl in the foreground chasing a butterfly. He stood frozen. "Margaret," he whispered. Victoria entered behind him, holding a mug. "That was her favorite," she said. "She painted it the summer before I started school." Daniel turned. "Why would she leave it in this house?" Victoria paused. "She didn't. My dad must have brought it here. Maybe. Maybe he planned on giving it to someone one day. Someone who understood what home means." Daniel placed it gently on the mantel. "I'll take good care of it." "I know you will," she said. Back at the hospital, Leonard looked out at the night sky. A nurse passed by his room and saw something unusual. He was smiling, really smiling. Not because of survival, because for the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for someone to knock on his door. They had already come in, and they had brought life with them. The wind howled outside Milwaukee General that evening, sweeping dry snow against the hospital windows like fingers dragging across glass. Inside room 408, it was quiet, but not empty. Leonard Grayson sat propped up in bed, a warm wool blanket over his lap, his eyes distant but clear. Daniel entered with a slow knock, carrying 2 coffees and a bag of cinnamon rolls. "You look better than yesterday," he said, placing the bag on the table. Leonard smirked. "I'd look even better if I wasn't wearing this backless excuse for a hospital gown." Daniel chuckled. "It's got character." "So does pneumonia." They sat in easy silence for a while. The lights were dimmed, and somewhere down the hallway, a radio played soft jazz, muffled by distance. Finally, Leonard spoke. "I had a dream last night. Thought I was back at the lake house. Margaret was painting. Victoria was in the garden chasing frogs." He smiled faintly. "When I woke up for a moment, I forgot I was here." Daniel leaned forward. "Do you want to go back there? One day?" Leonard didn't answer right away. He traced a vein on the back of his hand with a slow finger. "I don't think I have many one days left, Daniel." Daniel looked at him hard. "Don't talk like that." "I'm not afraid of dying," Leonard said quietly. "I'm afraid of leaving with things unfinished, with the wrong stories told." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Leonard reached again for the small wooden box by the nightstand. He opened it slowly, pulling out something from underneath the stack of photos. It was an old letter, yellowed and fragile, folded 3 times and sealed with tape that had cracked from age. He handed it to Daniel. "I wrote this the week after Victoria left, but I never sent it." Daniel looked down at the envelope. The handwriting was elegant, but shaky at the end. The name on it, "To my daughter." "Why didn't you?" "Because pride is loud," Leonard said. "And guilt whispers. and I couldn't tell the difference back then. Daniel didn't open it. He just held it. Leonard stared at him. "If I asked you to give it to her, would you?" Daniel's voice was rough. "I think you should." "I will," Leonard said softly. "But not yet." Daniel nodded. "She's not angry anymore, you know. She's hurting, but she's here. That means something." Leonard's eyes glistened. "I know. But sometimes it's easier to carry your pain than to let go of it. You get used to it, like an old coat, worn and heavy, but familiar." There was a pause. Then Daniel leaned forward. "You know, when my wife died, I used to leave the porch light on every night, just in case. I don't know. Her spirit passed by, maybe she'd see it. It was stupid." Leonard shook his head. "It's not stupid. It's love. Love doesn't die. It just changes houses." Daniel smiled faintly. They sat there, two men broken by time, bonded by loss, sharing warmth in the coldest room of the city. The next day, Victoria arrived with a large folder in her hands. Emily was at school, and Daniel had stayed home to finish patching up the new house, replacing a few broken tiles in the kitchen. Victoria sat beside her father and opened the folder on his lap. "These," she said softly, "are Mom's paintings. I've kept them all this time." Leonard's breath caught. She began laying them out one by one across the bed and side table. Small watercolors, larger oils, some charcoal sketches, each one a frozen memory. A sunrise at Door County, Victoria at the piano, a self-portrait of Margaret in shadow. "I found them in the attic after she died," Victoria said. "I wasn't sure what to do with them, so I just carried them from place to place." Leonard's hand trembled as he reached out to touch one, a small painting of their old kitchen, a teacup on the windowsill, the light through the curtains just so. "I thought I lost this," he murmured. "You didn't lose anything, Dad," she said. "You just put it away." He looked up at her, tears forming but not falling. "I'm sorry, Vicky." She froze. That name, Vicky. He hadn't called her that in over a decade. "I'm sorry for all of it," he said. "For yelling, for shutting you out, for making you believe I chose pride over you." She blinked, chest rising and falling fast. "I was scared," he added, "and stupid. But not a day went by that I didn't think of you." She reached across the bed and placed her hand on his. "I know." That was all she said. She didn't need to say more, because forgiveness sometimes doesn't arrive in words. It arrives in staying. That night, Daniel and Emily sat on the floor of their new living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the smell of tomato soup simmering on the stove. Emily reached into a box marked "Fragile" and pulled out a snow globe. Inside, a tiny house, a single tree, and a man holding a child's hand in the front yard. "I don't remember this one," she said. Daniel took it gently. "It was a gift," he said, "from your mom, the year you were born." Emily turned it over and wound it up. A quiet tune began to play, a lullaby. "Can we put it by the window?" Daniel nodded. "Perfect spot." As she placed it there, the snow began to fall harder outside. But inside, they were safe. And tomorrow, something new was coming. Something none of them were expecting. The storm came without warning. By morning, Milwaukee was buried under nearly 20 inches of snow, the heaviest blizzard in 6 years. Power flickered across neighborhoods, roads were closed, schools were shut down, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel couldn't make it to the hospital. He stood at the kitchen window, one hand gripping a hot mug of coffee, the other resting on the edge of the sink as he stared out into the white. Emily sat at the table, coloring quietly. "You think Mr. Grayson is warm enough?" she asked suddenly. Daniel turned. "Yeah," he said. "He's got the best nurses in the building." But something in his voice didn't sound convincing, even to himself. At the hospital, Leonard wasn't well. The night nurse had noticed the change at 3:14 a.m. His breathing shallower, the oxygen monitor dipping. By sunrise, they'd added a second IV, a cardiac monitor, and moved his bed slightly closer to the heater. But no one said it out loud. Not yet. Not even to Victoria, who arrived shortly after 8, boots soaked and hair tangled from the storm. She rushed into his room and froze. He was awake, but barely. His skin was pale again, his lips dry. His voice no longer came when he tried to speak. "Dad." He blinked. The nurse came in quietly, adjusting the wires on his chest. "He's weak today," she said gently, "but he knows you're here." Victoria pulled a chair close and reached for his hand. "I'm staying with you. I'm not going anywhere." He blinked again, slowly. She pulled the blanket up higher under his chin, brushing hair away from his forehead, the way she used to do when she was little. "You promised you'd meet Emily properly," she whispered. "Don't break that promise." He tried to smile, but it faded just as fast. Back at the house, Daniel stood in front of the fireplace, poking at the logs with a poker, watching the embers spark and die. The radio buzzed with storm reports. Outside, the roads were white and dead quiet. No cars, no people, just wind. He paced, checked his phone, no signal. Then a knock at the door. Not loud, but sharp. He opened it to find a tall, heavy-set man in a long black coat and snow-covered boots, carrying a leather folder in one hand and a flat briefcase in the other. His breath fogged in the air. His car, a large black SUV, was idling behind him. "Mr. Harper?" Daniel nodded, confused. "Can I help you?" The man extended a hand. "Richard Lawson. I'm with Dreyfus and Miller, estate attorneys." Daniel blinked. "Estate? For who?" "For Leonard Grayson." Daniel froze. "Is he... He's still alive," Richard said quickly. "But his health has taken a turn. Mr. Grayson requested that we meet you today. He signed new documents last week," he insisted. Daniel stepped back. "You couldn't have called first?" "I did. Tried. Storms knocked out half the towers." Daniel looked at him, breath catching. "Why now?" The man stepped inside, wiping snow from his boots. "Because he didn't want to wait. He said you would understand." 15 minutes later, Daniel sat at the kitchen table as Richard placed a manila folder in front of him. "This," he said, tapping it gently, "is Mr. Grayson's final addendum to his estate. It supersedes all previous versions. It names 2 beneficiaries, his daughter and you." Daniel's eyes snapped up. "What?" "You are being granted full ownership of the property you currently occupy. Along with the contents inside, a small savings account he set aside for maintenance and family dinners. His words, not mine." Daniel stared, his voice low. "He already gave me the house." Richard nodded. "That was just the beginning. There's more." He opened the folder and pulled out a handwritten letter, folded carefully, the paper thick and heavy. Richard didn't open it. "He wanted you to read this in private. When you're ready." Daniel's hands shook as he took it. That evening, with Emily asleep upstairs, curled into a blanket fort of pillows and stuffed animals, Daniel sat on the living room couch, firelight flickering across the hardwood floor, and opened Leonard's final letter. "Daniel, you once told me you wore your wedding ring to show your daughter what love looks like, even when it's gone. I never forgot that. When Margaret passed, I closed every curtain in my life. And when Victoria left, I didn't try to stop her. I told myself it was pride. But truth is, I was scared of loving someone again, scared of watching them walk away. But then you walked in. Not for praise, not for reward, just because someone needed help. In doing so, you reminded me that life, real life, is made of those tiny moments when we show up for each other, quietly, without asking for anything. This house is yours, not because you saved me, but because you brought me back, to my daughter, to my memories, to myself. Take care of Emily the way I should have taken care of mine. And if you ever wonder whether any of this mattered, it did. I promise you, it did. Leonard Daniel sat there, tears running silently down his cheeks, the paper trembling in his hands. He folded the letter slowly and placed it back in the envelope, then stood and walked upstairs. He peeked into Emily's room. She had kicked the blanket off in her sleep, mouth open slightly, a crayon still tucked behind her ear. Daniel knelt beside her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're gonna remember him," he whispered, "even if you don't know why." At the hospital, Victoria sat beside her father, watching the slow rhythm of his breath, the rise and fall weaker now. She took his hand in hers, pressing it to her heart. "I read your letter," she said softly. He read his too. Leonard's lips curved slightly, and for a moment, just a moment, his eyes opened. "Thank you," he whispered. Victoria leaned forward, tears slipping down her face. "No, Dad," she said. "Thank you for coming back." The snow stopped falling the next morning. For the first time in nearly a week, the skies above Milwaukee cracked open to reveal a pale blue stretch of cold, quiet air. Roads thawed slowly. Ice slid off rooftops. The city exhaled. And inside room 408 of Milwaukee General, the end had begun. Victoria sat silently by the window, her father sleeping behind her, more still than before. His chest moved, but barely. His body seemed to be slowly letting go. She had spent the night in that chair, wrapped in a hospital blanket, Leonard's hand resting loosely in hers. She watched the sun come up, not with awe, but with reverence. A nurse entered the room softly. "He's comfortable," she said. "If there's anyone else who needs to say goodbye, now would be the time." Victoria nodded without turning. "He has someone." Daniel didn't need the call. He felt it. He woke up at 6:03 a.m., wide-eyed and alert. The house was quiet, except for the distant hum of the heater and the soft rustle of wind outside. Emily was still asleep upstairs. Daniel stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the folded letter again. He had read it 3 times the night before. Every time, it landed harder. He poured a thermos of hot coffee, put on his coat, and left a sticky note for Emily on the fridge. "I'll be back before breakfast. Stay inside. I love you. Dad." The hallway leading to Leonard's room felt longer that morning, quieter, like the hospital itself was holding its breath. Daniel walked slowly, boots damp from melting snow, the coffee in his hand no longer about caffeine, just warmth. When he entered the room, Victoria stood up instantly. She didn't say a word. She just gave him a look, a soft nod. They switched places. Daniel sat down beside Leonard and looked at the man he had come to know. Not through stories or years, but through action, silence, and shared grief. Leonard looked thinner now, smaller somehow. Daniel leaned forward, gripping his hand. "Hey," he said softly. "It's me." Leonard didn't move, but Daniel continued. I read your letter. I don't think I've ever had anyone say something like that to me. Not even my own father." His throat tightened. "And I get it now. Why you did what you did. Why you gave me the house. It wasn't a gift. It was a message." He looked up at Leonard's face, eyes closed, but something behind them still listening. "You were telling me it's okay to let go of the past, that sometimes holding on too tightly just stops us from healing, stops us from letting people in." Daniel's voice cracked. "You gave me more than a house, Leonard. You gave me a place to raise my daughter. You gave me a second chance to believe in people again." There was a long silence. Then Leonard's fingers moved, just slightly. Daniel leaned closer. Leonard's lips parted. A whisper, barely audible. "Is she happy?" Daniel blinked back tears. "Emily?" Leonard gave the smallest nod. Daniel smiled gently. "She's happier than I've ever seen her. She calls the new house our forever place. She thinks of you like a storybook hero. The man in the chair who woke up." A long, trembling breath left Leonard's chest. "I'm tired," he said. Daniel gripped his hand tighter. "It's okay." There was a pause. Then Leonard's lips moved again. "Tell her. Thank you. For the cookies." Daniel let out a laugh. Wet, choked, real. "I will. I promise." A beat passed, then two, and then Leonard said nothing more. But Daniel didn't let go. Not for a long time. Victoria returned to the room to find Daniel still seated, silent, holding Leonard's hand. She approached gently. "Is he—" Daniel looked up. His eyes were red, but steady. "I think he's waiting." "For what?" she asked. Daniel stood slowly and stepped aside. "For you." Victoria knelt beside her father and took his other hand. Her fingers brushed against the soft flannel blanket covering his arm. She leaned in and pressed her forehead to his. "I forgive you, Dad," she whispered, "and I'll carry you with me. Always." A tear slipped from Leonard's closed eye. Then his chest rose, and gently, peacefully, didn't rise again. They didn't cry loudly. They sat beside him in silence, honoring not the moment of death, but the life that led to it. A life interrupted. A life rescued. A life redeemed. Later that evening, the snow began to fall again. Not a storm this time, just soft flurries brushing over rooftops. Inside Daniel's new home, Emily stood by the living room window, holding the snow globe with both hands. She turned it upside down and watched the flakes dance slowly over the tiny painted house inside. "Daddy?" she asked. Daniel looked up from the kitchen. "Yeah, baby. Can I write Mr. Grayson a letter?" Daniel paused, then walked over and knelt beside her. "Of course. What do you want to say?" Emily thought for a moment. "I want to say thank you, and I want to tell him we're taking care of his house, and that Mommy would have liked the fireplace." Daniel pulled her into a hug. His chest tightened with both love and sorrow. "She would have loved it," he whispered. "So much." That night, after Emily was tucked into bed, Daniel sat by the fireplace. The room was dim. The house was still. He placed Leonard's letter on the mantel, beside Margaret's painting. Then he reached for a blank notebook and started writing. The first words were simple. "Dear Emily, there's something I want you to know about the man who saved us without ever meaning to." 1 month later, Milwaukee's streets were slowly thawing from winter's grip. The snow had begun to melt, uncovering the edges of sidewalks, mailbox posts, forgotten toys buried under white. It was March now. The air still carried a chill, but the sun had returned, steady, golden, warm. Inside a small church, tucked between an elementary school and a bakery, soft organ music filled the space as people trickled in. Not many, maybe 30 at most, but they were real. Neighbors, nurses, friends, people who remembered Leonard Grayson, not the man in the chair, the man who came back to life. Daniel stood at the back of the room, wearing a dark gray suit that didn't quite fit across the shoulders. Emily sat beside him, her hair neatly braided, hands folded tightly in her lap. She wore a sky-blue ribbon around her neck, the same one Victoria had given her the day of the burial. At the front of the church stood a table. On it, a photograph of Leonard, young, smiling, arms wrapped around a little girl in pigtails, and beside it, a box containing the ashes. Victoria approached the podium. She took a deep breath, not to calm herself, but to feel grounded, to speak from truth. "I never thought I'd give this eulogy," she began, "because I never thought I'd get him back." The room held its breath. My father was a complicated man, but he was a man who learned, and in the end, that's what matters. He chose love over pride, presence over memory. And when I think about his life now, I don't think about the years he disappeared. I think about the weeks he came back and how much they mattered. She glanced down, smiled faintly. He used to tell me that silence was his safety, that it protected him from saying things wrong. But silence can become a wall. And Daniel. Daniel Harper broke through it. She looked toward Daniel. Their eyes met. "I never thanked you properly. Not just for saving my father's life, but for reminding him what it meant to be alive, for bringing him back to me, for giving him a place to leave love again." Later, outside the church, Daniel stood alone beneath a tree as the wind rustled the branches above. He held the folded pages of Leonard's letter again. He had read them more times than he could count, but today felt different. Final. Victoria approached slowly, coat wrapped tightly around her. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "It was an honor." She handed him a small envelope. "He wanted you to have this. One more thing." Inside, a key. "Another house?" Daniel asked with a light laugh. Victoria shook her head. "No, a locker. At the art museum downtown. Storage unit. He used to volunteer there after Mom died, cataloging paintings. He never told anyone. But he left a box there, labeled for you and Emily." Daniel looked at the key, speechless. Victoria smiled gently. "I haven't opened it. He wanted it to be yours, completely." They stood in silence. No more to say. Everything already said. 2 weeks later, the storage room in the basement of the Milwaukee Art Museum smelled of varnish, dust, and time. Daniel turned the key. Emily stood beside him, bouncing with nervous excitement. Inside the locker was a large flat box, sealed with tape, and a smaller one on top, labeled with 2 words, "For her." Daniel opened the small box first. Inside, a hand-carved wooden music box. On the lid, a painting. A child standing on a snowy porch holding a cookie tin, and an old man in the doorway, smiling with surprise. Emily gasped. "It's me," she whispered. "That's the day I gave him cookies." Daniel wound the music box gently. The tune, the same lullaby from the snow globe. Emily smiled wide. He remembered. Then Daniel opened the larger box. Inside, several original paintings, all signed M. Grayson. One showed the house, their house, in spring. Green leaves. Emily running through the yard. A man watching from the porch, hand resting on the railing. Another painting showed Leonard's hospital room, flooded with soft light, with 3 chairs around him. In them, Daniel, Victoria, Emily, all together. And the last? The most detailed, vibrant, precise? It was a painting of a garbage truck in the early morning, parked on a quiet Milwaukee street. A man in a work jacket stood staring at an old house's window. Light was just beginning to shine through the glass. Daniel stared at it for a long time. It was the beginning, framed, preserved, eternal. Spring came quickly that year. Daniel and Emily planted flowers in the front yard of their forever home. Daffodils, tulips. She insisted on painting rocks with bright colors and lining the walkway. Every Sunday, Victoria visited, sometimes bringing muffins, sometimes books. Once, she brought a canvas and painted with Emily on the porch. None of them said it out loud, but Leonard lived there now, not in body, but in brush strokes, in music boxes, in letters. In the silence between what had been and what still could be. One evening, Daniel sat on the porch with a journal in his lap. Emily ran across the yard, chasing fireflies with a jar in her hand. He opened the journal to the first page again. Dear Emily, there's something I want you to know about the man who saved us without ever meaning to. Because sometimes the smallest act, a knock, a coat, a warm voice, doesn't just change a day. It changes lives. And sometimes, garbage men carry more than trash. Sometimes, they carry grace. Some stories don't end. They stay with us, reminding us that one choice can reshape an entire life. If this journey moved you even a little, show it some love. Hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, or subscribe to keep these powerful stories coming. Your voice keeps this community alive, and I can't wait to hear it.